Welcome everyone to Ein Sof Learning. Today we're going to begin another 12 halachot, 12 laws on the observance of Shabbat, which, just to refresh your memory, Shabbat is the seventh day of the week. It is the time that God has allotted for us to rest. That's whenever He rested, when He was creating the world. 6 days He was creating, and the seventh day He rested. There's a lot of Kabbalistic significance to Shabbat and the things that are available to us, the connections that are available to us, specifically on Shabbat as opposed to the other 6 days. And we can learn those in other videos, but in this particular video, we're learning the halachot, which are the laws, the more practical significance of how to observe the Shabbat. So today we're going to learn the costs of Shabbat. 13. Even though one's livelihood for the year is determined on Rosh Hashanah, the Gemara states that money that is spent on Shabbat expenses do not detract from the money that was allotted to him on Rosh Hashanah. So once a year, Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. It's the new year in the Jewish faith. So on this day, based on the way you have performed during the last year, you get a kind of predetermination of how much money you're going to make in the coming year. How much money are you going to make in the next year? It's decided on Rosh Hashanah. But it's saying here that even though the amount of money you make is determined on Rosh Hashanah, the money that you spend during the week for the sake of sanctifying Shabbat and preparing for Shabbat does not detract from the money that you've earned on Rosh Hashanah for the coming year. It doesn't diminish from that particular value that you have earned that year. Very good. 14. One who cannot afford food for Shabbat is permitted to borrow money even if it is lent on interest if it is ribit derabanan. So generally speaking, we're not supposed to charge interest or pay interest, meaning we shouldn't charge each other interest for loans. But if you can't afford for Shabbat, you're allowed to borrow, and even if they're charging you interest, because some people don't always follow the laws, so even if they're not, because we're not living in a Jewish rule. If we were living under the Jewish law, then there wouldn't be anyone charging interest. But if we're living right now in America or you're somewhere else, people are charging interest everywhere, including Jews. So you're allowed to take that loan and pay the interest for the sake of affording food for Shabbat. 15. It is proper to honor the Shabbat by having meat, wine, and other special dishes. However, one is not obligated to buy more than one can afford. So it's good to have meat, wine, and other special dishes. But if you can't afford it, you don't have to. 16. It is customary to buy flowers in the honor of Shabbat, just to sanctify it more, make it more decorative, more beautiful. And it says that the type of flower that's preferred is roses. Roses are the best type of flower to bring for Shabbat. Again, I'm not going into the mystical significance of any of these statements here. Of course, there is mystical significance, or it could be for the sake of just beautifying the mitzvah, which is also possible. But now that was the cost of Shabbat. Now let's look at the 5 halachot for tasting the Shabbat food. Since there is a mitzvah to eat good tasting food on Shabbat, one should taste the food before Shabbat in order to ensure that it is not lacking anything. So before Shabbat begins, you can taste the food that you're cooking just to make sure that it's not lacking any salt, any spices. If you need to add anything, you can do those last minute. You can taste it. 18. When tasting the food that is for Shabbat, for the sake of ensuring that it's not lacking anything, one does not have to recite a bracha, a blessing, upon tasting, even if he swallows. However, if one eats a kazait is the size of an olive. If one eats a kazait of food, or a revi'it of liquid, a revi'it is about half a cup of liquid, then one must recite a bracha. So if you eat more than a kazait, or if you eat a kazait or more, or if you drink a revi'it or more, then you have to recite a blessing. But if it's less than that, then you don't have to. In order to be obligated in reciting a blessing, one should have the intention to benefit from the food even when he is only tasting a very small amount. So saying the reason why is because in order for you to be obligated to recite a blessing is that you have to have the intention to benefit from it. But you're not eating it for the purpose of benefiting from it in that moment. You're eating it for the purpose of preparing for Shabbat. And they've instituted that is something that is okay to do without reciting a blessing. If it's below the size of a kazait, which is an olive, or for liquids below the size of the volume of half a cup, which is for liquids. 19. When the fast of the 10th of Tevet is on a Friday, one may taste the Shabbat food without reciting a blessing and spit it out, but one may not swallow it. So the fact that it's a fast overrides you tasting the food for Shabbat. It's a fast. You're not supposed to eat. You can't swallow. But you can put it in your mouth without saying a bracha, of course, and spit it out for the sake of tasting the food for Shabbat. Good. But you can't eat because it's a fast. 20. One may even taste the meat or chicken that's prepared for Shabbat on Erev Shabbat, Chazon, Erev Shabbat Chazon, to ensure that it is not lacking anything. Likewise, one may taste the Shabbat food on the 10th of Av. So it says that even if it's a main course like chicken, you're allowed to taste that, or meat, you're allowed to taste it for the sake of preparing for Shabbat, making sure that it tastes good, on Erev Shabbat, which is around, again, we said 24 hours before the Shabbat begins on Friday evening. And you can also do this on the 10th of Av. So the 10th of Av is a time when we fast, and you're also able to taste it without swallowing, of course, on the 10th of Av. Good. 21. Before Shabbat, it is permitted to eat from the food that was prepared for Shabbat, provided that one ensures that there will be enough food remaining for Shabbat. So before we were talking about tasting the food, now it's saying if you want to eat it, like a full-on meal before Shabbat, but you're taking from the food that you prepared for Shabbat, it's okay as long as you ensure that there will be enough food remaining for Shabbat. So, very good. This has been 9 more laws on the observance of Shabbat in regards to the costs of Shabbat and the tasting the Shabbat food. In the next video, we're going to go through another set of halachot, another set of laws on baking challah. As we know, we eat challah on Shabbat, and doing laundry on Erev Shabbat. I hope to see you there.